Welcome to Hurt at Work, a Kentucky workers' comp podcast. Today, Louisville workers' compensation attorney Scott Scheynost is going to provide helpful information, tips, and advice for injured workers and their families. Scott's goal is to help you to maximize the benefits you receive. If working's got you hurting, sit back and listen to Scott address topics that matter to you. Well, welcome back. Today we have Scott Scheynost, who handles Louisville workers' compensation claims throughout Kentucky. He's in the studio, but we also have a guest. We have Trevor Smith with us, and Trevor is with the firm Smith & Wax Law here in Louisville, and Trevor focuses his practice primarily on Social Security disability cases and SSI cases. So I thought today this would be a great opportunity to get the two of you guys together to kind of talk, because sometimes these cases can actually be filed at the same time, and that may be a good reason to know these guys and to know, hey, look, you may have another source of revenue out there, another source of income, if you're prepared to ask the right questions. And your attorney obviously is going to lead you into that discussion. Scott, welcome, buddy. Let's kick it off with you today.
Glad to be here. Glad Trevor's here. I talk about Trevor all the time in a lot of my cases, and I'm glad he's here to help us today. I think the main purpose of this today is for me to explain how a workers' compensation claim can also be a Social Security disability insurance claim. And I've already had this conversation probably 3 to maybe 4 times this week with different clients and other attorneys. A lot of people don't realize that you can have a Social Security disability claim in addition to a workers' compensation claim. And a lot of folks will call me up. They say they've got a workers' comp claim. They may have a very serious injury. They may have some other things going on in their life besides the workers' compensation claim. The workers' compensation claim may cause some anxiety and depression, but not only in addition to the workers' compensation claim that they call me about, but they may also have a Social Security claim. And we'll talk about that here in a little second. But you can have both of them at the same time. I can proceed with a workers' compensation claim. I don't do Social Security disability insurance claims. I generally refer those out to Trevor. Trevor does those. He'll be able to explain that a little bit more in a second. But I think it's important for everybody to realize you can have both of these at the same time. There's some weird rules that come into Social Security offsets if you get workers' comp and Social Security at the same time. We're not going to cloud up the scene with that right now, but I think it's important for everybody to remember you can get them both at the same time. You get more money when you're getting both at the same time. You might be able to get some additional medical benefits for things that aren't work-related if you're off work long enough and you get Social Security disability insurance. And a lot of people don't also realize that it doesn't really cost anything to proceed with a workers' comp claim. We handle them on contingency fee basis, and I'm pretty sure Trevor handles the Social Security disability insurance claims on a contingency fee basis too. So I think we'll talk a little bit more about what generates a Social Security claim in a second.
Absolutely.
Trevor wants to add a little bit about how all this goes together.
Scott, just for someone who may be tuning in for the first time,
Sure.
Will you explain a contingency fee claim?
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes.
No, that's okay.
Contingency fee means we don't charge you anything unless we recover money for you. So if you call me up on the phone, I talk to you, if you sit down and meet with me, I'm not charging you for any of that. I don't charge by the hour. We only charge if we get money for you. In Kentucky, the contingency fee is kind of structured. It's important for everybody to realize you can't get more than 20% and you can't get more than $18,000 in attorney's fees. There may be some other expenses involved, but as far as attorney's fees, that's the most we can get. I'm pretty sure Trevor works on a contingency fee too.
Well, Trevor, welcome to the episode today. I appreciate you being here. Why don't you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your firm, and then we'll jump in and talk about your side of it as well.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. And Scott, thank you so much for asking me to do this. You know, Scott and I have worked hand in hand with these types of cases for a decade, and then I know Scott was working with my mentor, Al Wax, who's still with me for years before that. So we've been doing these workers' comp claims and disability claims for years and years, and Scott's exactly right. I feel, my personal opinion is, if you don't try to take advantage of the disability side of things, you're just leaving money on the table and not taking advantage of an insurance policy that you've been paying into. Anyways, Jim, it's great to be here. My law practice it's Smith & Wax Law. We're located at 315 Guthrie Street, downtown Louisville, Suite 200.
You're just right off 4th Street Live, basically.
Just right off between 4th Street Live and the downtown Y, just kind of right there, little street. It's very convenient. And my phone number, if you want to ever call me, is 502-581-1133. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to diving into these topics here in the next few minutes.
Absolutely. And friends, I'm going to have a link to both Scott's law firm, obviously his website and phone numbers, but I'm also going to provide that in the show notes for Trevor's firm as well. So if you don't have a pen and paper with you, don't worry about it. It's all there. If you go to Scott's website, when you listen to this episode, ScheynostLaw.com, you can go to this episode, and there's a whole bunch of notes that come along with this podcast recording, and you'll have all those links right there. So we're going to make it real simple. The important thing today is that you just listen to the information, you get a good idea of how this can benefit your case, and pick up the phone and call these guys.
Yeah, and Trevor just mentioned Al, and that probably was the epiphany for me when I first met Al back in the early 90s, and I was working in a firm, and we did some workers' compensation, and somebody knew Al, and we had lunch one day, and they said, "Oh, Al does Social Security disability insurance too." And I said, "Okay, I do workers' comp." And he goes, "Oh, you can get both of them at the same time." And I looked at him and go, "What do you mean you can get both of them at the same time?" And I was an attorney. I'd been practicing for a couple of years, but I'd never done any Social Security work. Nobody in my firm had ever done any Social Security work. And Al had mentioned that, and we did mainly defense work. The firm I was at mainly represented some of the bigger employers in town. And Al mentioned that to me, and I just had never thought about it. And he talked about the requirements. You had to be unable to work for a certain period of time. And I'm thinking, well, that's a lot of these workers' compensation claims. And that was a kind of a light going off in the side of my head. All these people that get hurt at work may also have another stream of revenue, may have another benefit. And Trevor was right. Every time you have money taken out of your paycheck, you're actually paying for this. This insurance you've paid for through your Social Security wages that are taken out of your check. So everybody out there that's worked a certain period of time has this possible thing out there that might be able to help them. In general, in a workers' compensation claim, when I start talking to people, if they mention a couple of things that are kind of like red flags, I guess, to me, that this might be a Social Security claim, I usually tell them to give Trevor a call. And Trevor's probably going to be able to correct me on this here in a second, but the things that are important to me when I realize there may also be a Social Security claim involved, if somebody's over a certain age, maybe I think 55 seems to be the magic age, and they have a serious injury, I think they probably have it. I tell them they have probably a decent shot at Social Security disability insurance, depending on the injury, and to give Trevor a call. If they've been disabled and unable to work for a significant period of time, especially at least a year, but if it looks like they're going to be off work for at least a year or longer, even if they're going to go back to work, I'll tell them to give Trevor a call, and you can tell them how this works a little bit too.
Sure.
But in most cases, when you're not going to be able to go back to work, you're also going to be able to get Social Security disability benefits too. So those are kind of the three situations when I tell folks to give Trevor. Trevor might be able to explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just say what usually happens, the way it works is a client will call me and schedule a consultation, which is always free there at my office. And they'll say, well, look, Scott Scheynost referred us. So I know right there that my disability claim began with an injury at work. And in order for us to have a case at all, the client has to have what's called a severe impairment, at least one severe impairment. And when it comes from the workers' comp side of things, it's 9 times out of 10, it's a physical. They've hurt.
Could be a back injury,
backs,
something like that.
Knees, shoulders, but it's a physical problem most times.
A lot of people call me about back problems. They've had a back surgery. They may have had a fusion, a neck fusion. Those would be the significant injuries you're talking about, aren't they?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it could be a lot of things, but certainly, Scott, those things. So the person comes to me, and my first question is, do you have a severe impairment that has either lasted 12 months or is likely to last 12 months? And during that period of time, you're not able to perform a full work day, a full work week. And if that answer is yes, then we file a claim. And there's no cost in filing the claim. Doesn't cost the client anything to try to file for disability. They don't pay me any money up front. I only win if they. I only get paid if they win, and there's back pay.
So again, it's a contingency fee.
It's like a contingency fee. So it's kind of a no-brainer. And the sooner you start, the sooner you can get paid. The sooner you can start getting into payment and start getting some help, because these people come to see me. They're down. They're down and out. These are people that if they came from Scott, they've got a work history. They're used to getting up every day, 5 days a week, going to work, and they're not able to do that anymore. They can't provide for their family, or they can't add, and they need something. So it's just another opportunity to get that person some help. And this is an insurance policy that they've been paying into, so let's try to collect it. So if I can prove that your impairment's going to keep you off work for at least a year, then we got something there. Now, Scott mentioned age. And of course, age does come into play. And without, trying to teach a law school class on Social Security disability, let me just say this. On the physical side of things, for a physical impairment, there are certain ages where it becomes easier to get your disability. Magic numbers, magic ages, I'll tell. Age 50, age 55, and age 60. And it also has to do not just with age, but on what kind of job you did and your education. There's a few things that go into it, but certainly a case for physical disability gets better at age 50, at age 55, and at age 60. It becomes easier to get. And so, you evaluate that and you give it a go. I've had a lot of success at these. A lot of success. We've been able to help people in situations where they were, just desperate. But like I said earlier, and like I've said on my podcast, these disability claims can take, anywhere from a couple of months to a year and a half to get resolved. So if Scott suggests you give me a call, go ahead and do it.
Get that process underway.
Get it rolling.
Now, Trevor, every now and then I have somebody that for whatever reason, they really don't want to apply for Social Security disability. You can just see it in their eyes. It's almost like they think they're throwing in the towel. But I tell those folks, you can still go back to work and get Social Security disability benefits.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of people I deal with. They're going to have a back surgery. They've been going through 6 months of medical treatment. They're going to have another surgery. They're going to be off work for another 8, 10, 12 months. And I got a feeling once they've been off work 12 months, they're eligible for Social Security disability, even if they go back to work. Is that correct?
Yeah, so all the time, what you need is the 12 months. But, people don't, a lot of people when they apply for disability or when they think, well, I guess I'm going to be on this for the rest of my life. I'm giving, like Scott said, I'm giving up. This is it for me. And I'm only, 52 years old and I just don't want to apply for disability. That's not the case at all. Disability can be used to help you get through a very specific time. So I've got a lot of clients that I tell, some of my clients that are younger people, I say, don't look at this as the rest of your life. It doesn't have to be. If you can recover from that back surgery, if you can find the right balance of medication to help with your mental illness, if you can recover from that hip surgery, whatever it is, and you feel better, go back to work. You don't have to be on disability. You can. All I tell them to do is let me know that they've gone back, and if our case hasn't been resolved, we don't have to pursue it anymore. I can drop the case. It's no problem. I'm not going to charge them anything. But Social Security, Scott, they even do something. It's called a trial work period, and I think this is such a great thing. But they really want people to work. The Social Security Administration, they don't want to put you on. They want you to work. So they will let you do a trial work period. And it's just, let's say you go back to work 2 or 3 months, you give it a shot. And then at the end of that time, you just can't do it anymore. The pain is too much. Then you stop and your disability will continue. They never even stopped it. Yeah. But after 3 or 4 or 5 months, if you're still going good, then you stop your check because it looks like you've made it.
Yeah, in workers' comp, we got a thing called vocational rehabilitation where somebody can sometimes go back and be retrained. So they could have the work injury, recover from that, go through the vocational rehabilitation, and during this period of time also receive Social Security disability, correct, even if they go back to another job?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, though. Earlier we talked about that magic age, 50s, 55s. Yeah. That's not to say if you're 27 and you get injured that you shouldn't try to pursue either a comp or a Social Security disability.
What I tell folks is you don't have to file for workers' comp. You don't have to file for Social Security. You don't have to file for both of them at the same time. But the prudent thing to do, if you're off work, is to file for Social Security and workers' comp. If you go back to work, then the Social Security will be happy to shut down the claim. That's what I tell them. I'm assuming that's correct because they won't have to pay anything. But at the same time, there's some lengthy processes you have to go through, as I understand it, in Social Security to get benefits. And the sooner you start that, probably the better off you're going to be.
Yes. And yeah, exactly, Scott. So that's why I say when Scott refers a client to give me a call, let's go ahead and get started. And Jim's exactly right. It doesn't matter. Listen, I talk about 50, 55. If you're 19, and a good case is a good case is a good case. I'm just saying that it becomes easier once you're older.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are people, I've got clients, well, I've got children, but that's a whole different standard. But I mean, for insofar as adults go, I've got everybody from 18 all the way up until their early 60s.
Right.
You know, and if they are unable to put together a 40-hour work week consistently, then they can get their disability. But we got to prove it. And, you know, that's another thing I wanted to say. So we got to prove these things. Disability, Social Security disability, and workers' comp are different. You know, just being approved for one does not automatically make you approved for the other.
We've got different standards in both, two different sets of judges in each system. We look at a lot of the same things. For instance, in my workers' comp practice, when somebody comes in, the first thing I have them do is sign a bunch of medical records waivers. And in Kentucky, we can get a free copy of your medical records. So we have to do a specific waiver for that. It takes a little bit longer, but you know, if we don't do that, it's going to cost you sometimes $300 or $400 to get your medical records from each provider. So we do a free copy. We get the medical records. And then if I've got them, I'm happy to give them to Trevor if the client gives me the permission. And I think Trevor needs those medical records for the Social Security Administration too, don't you?
Exactly. So we do. That's what Scott and I do all the time. So when my clients come in, I do the same thing. I say, give me a list of your doctors and hospitals. And if it's a workers' comp case that Scott has referred me, then I just write down, get the records from Scott.
Yeah.
Because you're only entitled to one free copy. But it's it's different standards. So in workers' comp, there's percentages of disability.
Correct. Yeah, you can be partially disabled. You can have a 5 or 10% disability and go back to work and still get money for that.
Does that come back to your impairment rating? Is that
we've talked about this a little bit before, but in workers' comp, to get money for a permanent injury, a doctor somewhere has to say you have to have a permanent impairment rating. And like you said, it could be partial. It could be 5%, 10%, 20%. So the bottom line is you could go back to work at your old job doing the same thing, but because of your injury, you have an impairment rating and still be entitled to money for the workers' comp claim. Now, as I understand it in Social Security, it's a little bit higher standard about being able to work. You can't work in any gainful employment. Is that the standard?
It's no percentage. It's 100%. I can't work. And, so a lot of times if Scott refers a case to me, that'll come up. So the client will say, well, I can't go back to my job. And that may be true. You may not be able to go back to your job at the factory or at the warehouse or whatever. But in Social Security cases, you got to be unable to do any job.
Now, on the flip side of that, in workers' comp, when you have a back injury, that's what we're arguing about, your impairment rating for the back injury, whether or not this back injury prevents you from doing the job. But in Social Security, you not only look at that back injury, but you look at other conditions. For instance, if there's anxiety, depression, if they got blood pressure. Am I right on that?
You're exactly right. So I'll get a call, a client coming in to meet with me that was referred by Scott. It's a workers' comp. And they fell at work and something happened, they hurt their back. And that's what the workers' comp case is primarily about. It's a back injury. And that may be the driving force behind the disability case also. But, the longer these cases stretch out, the more issues the client is likely to have. I mean, if they're off work 3 or 4 months, having trouble providing for the family, then naturally they're going to have depression, or they might have anxiety, or there might be ancillary things that come up and they need treatment for that. Well, I'll get all that stuff. I'll get all those records. I'll get the psychiatrist. I'll get the therapist. And then, of course, I'll get the back people. Right. But I'll get it all, and I'll present that to the judge in the disability case. And it's all considered. So yeah, it may start off as one thing when the case is referred to me, but by the time I'm going to court, there's 3 or 4 other things that are involved.
Now, you just mentioned something a second ago. We call it psychological overlay, where you have a workers' comp claim that causes depression and anxiety. That actually can be work-related. But if somebody had depression and anxiety before the workers' compensation claim, what we call a pre-existing condition, and the workers' compensation claim doesn't have anything to do with that, we really can't recover that for them. But that would be an element of the Social Security claim, wouldn't it? The pre-existing condition, even though it's not work-related or exacerbated by it, it's still something that you guys can look at.
Exactly. It does. There's no such thing as pre-existing. It's you look at the claimant as a whole. What are they like physically, mentally, all parts of the body and mind, and then you come up with the picture of what it boils down to is that they do what's called a residual functional capacity evaluation, right, which is just like, what can you do? What can you do physically? What can you do mentally? How long can you do this, that, and the other? And they put that together, and if that equals no jobs, then you win. But if it equals, they can still do some sedentary work, or they can do some, then you might not. But then again, there's so many other factors. It's almost like I'm not doing it justice, because there's the stuff with the age comes into play, and So
well, something else too. In the course of my case, if I have somebody with a very significant injury and I don't think they're going to be able to go back to work anywhere, then I'll do what's called a vocational evaluation. I'll send them to an expert, and we'll pay for that expert to look at him. They'll do a battery test. They'll have them do IQ tests. They'll have them do reading tests. They'll ask them what their employment history was. What can you do now? What's your proclivity, I guess, to do something else in the future. But we'll do all that, and I'll submit that in the workers' compensation claim. And it's not a cheap test. We spend a couple $100 for it. But as I understand it, the person we use mainly for that does a lot of this for the Social Security Administration too. I'm not going to name any names. But it's my understanding that this same procedure that we use in this test, this expert we use in the workers' comp claim, can also be used in the Social Security claim too.
Yeah, you're right. Every time I get one of those, I'll get it from Scott, and I'll submit it in my case, my disability case, and they're always so helpful. I mean, it's such a nice piece of evidence. They're always so well done, and generally speaking, we're familiar with the person that did the report. We know them. There's a few of them that do private stuff, and they also testify at these disability. But and so there's a lot of credibility there, and they're very well done. So whenever I get one of those assessments,
right,
I really push it hard, and I'll use that in my argument at the hearing.
Okay.
Well, yeah. Trevor, actually, a while back in episode 3 of your podcast, Social Security Disability Podcast, you mentioned that the need to get the medical professional to really document what's going on. And so if you're interested in again, a little bit more information as far as why seeing these healthcare experts is part of your case and why that's so important, your episode 3 goes into that in detail.
Yes.
Especially when we're dealing with cognitive or psychological issues.
Yes.
Yeah, and sometimes we'll also send people out for medical examinations with an independent medical examiner too, and I'm assuming that also is helpful in your Social Security claim too.
It is. There's a lot of times though in workers' comp you'll get competing.
Right.
And so
battle of experts.
Yeah, a battle of experts. So you'll find one that's really good for your case, but you've got to submit both of them to the judge. You can't just submit your side. That's not. So then you got to submit both of them. So you tend to, but I'll definitely take the one that helps me, and I'll push it for sure.
Well, my experience is the one that we listen to usually spends a lot more time with them, and I guess the Social Security Administration judges are familiar with the folks that do these evaluations too.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure. And we've even, I think there's a couple of the judges that I'm in front of that were former workers' comp judges.
Judge Lowther, yeah.
And so I know that there's some of them that are very familiar, and they all know. I mean, workers' comp and disability, they go hand in hand so much that the people over there at the Social Security Administration, they see this stuff all the time.
We do a lot of the same things, but we do it in slightly different ways, and we have slightly different standards. So it's almost like you've got a puzzle with pieces that are similar, but just a little bit different. They don't always fit together.
They don't.
But a lot of the stuff I use, I'm pretty sure you use too. And it just amazes me how many people I've had this discussion with that just don't want to file a Social Security claim. They don't want to mess with it. They for some reason they just don't want to say they're totally disabled for the rest of their life. But again, to me, the prudent thing is to give you a call and talk to them about this stuff. It doesn't cost them anything, really. You're on a contingency fee, right?
Exactly. That's the thing. I mean, it's it is. I guess guys like us, we just can't understand why someone wouldn't want to take advantage of it. I really can't imagine.
It's kind of interesting. I mean, I've got my own business podcast, and I talk about mindset issues with business leaders and things like that. When you look at this, I mean, you've got car insurance, and if you're in a wreck, if you're in an accident, you're probably going to use the car insurance.
If anybody
this is the same thing. This is SSDI.
Correct.
This is the I stands for insurance. This is something you're already paying for.
Yeah, as I understand it, it's part of the FICA taxes that are taken out of your payroll. Yeah. And we get into some complicated things sometimes about how all this money is dispersed. There's a workers' comp offset for the Social Security, which means Social Security doesn't affect workers' compensation benefits, but the workers' compensation benefits can affect your Social Security. And as I understand it, the Social Security Administration will look at how much money has been paid into the system over your lifetime. And
Correct.
There's a very complex formula to determine how much they pay. But the bottom line is you usually get more for both. I don't know of any situations, I'm unaware that I don't think it could possibly happen where you're going to get less, but you almost always get more with both. But as I understand it too, with Social Security, there's two types of Social Security. You've got SSDI, where you've paid enough into the system that you get Social Security disability insurance benefits, which is a dollar amount per month, and then you also get Medicare. But then there's also SSI that's available if you've not paid into the system. If you're a young kid, you don't have enough quarters, if you've been disabled and gone back to work and you're hurt someplace. If you could kind of go over that and the benefits available for those two different things real fast.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, so most of the people that come to me from the workers' comp side of things are workers, obviously. They had hurt at work. So most of those people have worked enough quarters and paid enough into the Social Security Administration that they have earned an insurance policy against being disabled. An insurance policy, just like Jim said, it's just like car insurance or homeowners. And if you become unable to work, I can prove your disability, then you're going to get a check each month that's different for everybody because it depends on how much you paid in, and you get Medicare. Well, that's what most of the cases that I get from the workers' comp side, that's what most of them are. They're for disability insurance benefits. But there's a whole nother program out there that the Social Security has in place for us. It's a safety net, and that's Supplemental Security Income, SSI. And SSI is not work-based at all. I mean, you don't have to have worked a day in your life. There's children on SSI, but it's need-based. So you've got to be, basically what I tell my clients is you got to be about broke. And what I mean by that is less than for an individual, less than $2,000 worth of assets, resources. You're allowed to have one house and one car. That doesn't count against that. But everything else does. So they're going to look at your checkings, savings account, retirement, another car, another piece of property, whatever. And if that adds up to more than $2,000, then you're not eligible for SSI.
Do debts come into this at all as an offset, or is it just assets?
It's no, debts don't come into it at all.
Yeah, and the standard to get SSDI and the standard to get SSI is basically the same. It's just how much you've paid into the system that determines whether or not you get one of those.
It's correct. It's two different programs. But once you get your foot in the door, it's the same. I got to prove you're disabled.
Yeah, for both of them.
For both of them.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter to me. I don't handle one case different than the other, except for when I help my clients do the applications, which I do. Yeah. So but most of the time, I'll do both applications, and I'll let the government tell me which one my client is, which one they fit into.
Now, another thing too with SSDI is as I understand it, after you've been disabled for 2 years, you also qualify for Medicare. Now, that also applies to SSI, doesn't it?
No, SSI, you get Medicaid, and there's not a 2-year waiting period.
So that's immediate then.
Right, right.
Well, that's important because in workers' comp, people are generally working at a job, and that job provides their health insurance, and they get hurt at work. And workers' comp, we can get them all the medical benefits that are required for that work-related injury, but if for some reason they lose their job, they lose their health insurance. Now, I can get workers' comp benefits for the medical treatment for the work-related injury for the rest of their life, but the workers' comp system in Kentucky does not provide anything for health insurance for other things.
Yeah.
So if you've got a back injury and you need a fusion 5 years from now, I can help you get that. But if you develop diabetes that's not related somehow to the workers' comp injury, I can't get any medical treatment for that. But if they apply for Social Security disability insurance, they get Medicare that might help, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So that's another reason to apply is to get the medical insurance.
That's a huge reason. I've got a lot of people that tell me, I'm not so much concerned about the check each month, although I think that they secretly are. But, but they say, it's that insurance that I need. Yeah. And, with SSI, you get Medicaid, which, of course, just pays for everything. The only thing, and you did mention it, that I will say about the disability insurance and the Medicare is the 2-year waiting period. Yeah. 2 years from the onset of your disability, you've got to, that's when you get your money. I don't know why that's when you get your insurance. I don't know why that is.
It's just the rule, though.
It's just the rule. Ask your congressman. But
and we talked earlier, I briefly mentioned sometimes the money that you paid into the system and the workers' comp benefits, there's an offset with Social Security, and it might offset a lot of the Social Security benefits. But sometimes just the health insurance is a reason to apply.
Right, exactly. You'll have that. If nothing else, you'll have the insurance.
And there's really no other government way to get health insurance unless you're, I guess, don't have any money at all through.
Yeah, you get people. I get a lot of clients on Passport.
Passport, okay, that's it.
That kind of stuff.
Is that Medicaid, Passport, basically?
Yeah, it's essentially.
So essentially, they've already qualified for the SSI.
Yeah, a lot of my SSI clients, they're already on Passport. So what they want is some help financially each month to buy groceries, pay rent, that kind of stuff. So for them, it is more about the money because they already have Passport.
But the medical treatment about if you're hurt at work and you lose your health insurance, how else are you going to have your other health insurance taken care of, non-work related? It's just through the SSDI and getting Medicare.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's so critical to some people. It's life-saving. I just hate that there's that 2-year waiting period. I do. Yeah. That frustrates me, but there's nothing we can do about it.
Well, how often is it? I've had a couple conversations here in the last week or two with some attorneys that didn't realize you could get Social Security disability for being disabled, and others didn't realize you could get Social Security disability with workers' compensation at the same time. Have you had that conversation very often with other attorneys?
I tell them all the time. So I've got people that like workers' comp, like yourself, and then also personal injury lawyers.
Yeah.
I got a lot of referrals from them because they see clients that are just like I said earlier, just leaving money on the table, not collecting on these insurance policies that they've been paying into for some unknown. And I think that if people were properly educated about it, they would start doing it more often. But all I need to have a case to be successful is for you to be off work, either off work for 12 months or have a situation where you're likely to be. I'm not saying don't wait till you're off work 12 months. Go ahead and file right away. If you get hurt at work, go see Scott and then come see me. We'll do it all right away. But the impairment has to be one that is likely to last 12 months.
Let me ask you a little bit about applying for benefits. In workers' compensation, when somebody gets hurt at work, usually the employer will turn it into the workers' comp insurance carrier. They'll assign an adjuster to it. The adjuster will do an investigation. Everything's okay. They'll go ahead and pay for medical expenses, pay money for being off work, and the claim kind of gets started on its own. And if for some reason it gets denied, they come and see me, and we file a claim, and we get that going. But in Social Security, I've had people ask me, and I think there's been a change in the system the last couple of years. My understanding is in the past you could file for that on your own. Okay, but here recently they've changed the system around a little bit. They've changed the system around where it might be more beneficial for them to see you at the original filing. You can get it done faster. Is that right?
Well, we do. And you're right. I mean, there's it's a service that we offer our clients to help them to file for disability. Now, with disability insurance benefits, you can go online and do that yourself. It's tricky, and but you can do it. You can go online and file your own application for disability insurance benefits. For an SSI application, that's a paper application. That's a thick packet of papers, and the client has to go to the Social Security office to fill that out. So they don't have to come to me. They don't have to. They can apply themselves. They can go to the local office, say they want to apply for disability, and the clerk will take care of it all. But most people, when they call me, they've got some questions. What is it? What do I expect? How can I do this? And then I say, well, would you like for us to apply for you so you don't have to go down to the office, and we'll make sure that no mistakes, and It's just easier and safer. And most of them will do that. Now, we do have some people that say, I'm going to do it myself, and then after their first denial, they'll call me.
Yeah, and it's important for them to appeal that denial as soon as possible. It basically sits there until they appeal it. And some of them say, I got 60 days, so I'll file on the 59th day.
Yeah.
Well, that's 2 months they've lost, so
right.
Getting resolved, isn't it?
Right.
Now, I tell folks, I had this conversation this week. They asked me, do I need an attorney yet? And my general standard in a workers' compensation claim is if you have a permanent injury, it's even a 1 or 2% impairment rating, you're entitled to that money for that permanent injury, but you're also entitled to medical expenses, vocational rehabilitation, right to reopen, that the workers' comp adjuster will never tell you about. And if you have a permanent injury, you need an attorney, and you might as well get me right now, because you're probably going to be arguing about medical treatment and stuff like that, as opposed to later on down the road. And then also, if I'm involved in it at the beginning, I'm going to get your medical records, and then when we're ready to try to wrap this up, it's not going to take 3 or 4 months to get all that stuff together. So when do you tell people it's a good time to start the Social Security claim? To see you, should I say? After it's been appealed, at the beginning? What's the best time for them to see you?
I feel like, my opinion is at the beginning. I mean, call me or come see me. Schedule an appointment for a consultation, and then I'll take it from the very beginning. That way, I know it's seamless. I've had it from birth, all the way until the end.
Right.
And that's a seamless thing that I found that works better. I'm able to get the evidence better. I'm able to make sure that Social Security's got it in a timely fashion. I'm able to keep up with the appeals.
I was going to say, you monitor the appeals too, don't you?
I have to.
Actually, Trevor probably didn't know this, but I actually had one client I sent to him, and the Social Security Administration, I think, denied the claim, but never sent out a letter about that. Nobody ever got it. But you, in the normal course of your business, every 2-3 weeks, send out a letter to them saying, what's the status of it? If it's been denied, we're appealing it, which actually serves as an appeal, doesn't it?
It does. We do that all the time. We send out status letters in our cases because mistakes are made. Mistakes are made by the Social Security Administration, not by me.
And which is why I don't do Social Security work, by the way.
I mean,
this is the main reason why I don't do it.
It's true. It's frustrating, Scott. We spend so much time.
This is why I don't do it. Yeah.
Well, it's true. It's a great, big, federal agency, and I know they do the best they can. But
if you like working with the IRS, you'll like the SSA.
It's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, they make mistakes, and so we are constantly protecting our clients' interest. So in case they don't mail something out to my client that has a deadline, or to me, and I'm protecting us all by going ahead and doing these things called status letters, which status/appeal.
Yeah, Trevor doesn't even know this, but my client told me about it. And I thought, well, that's pretty daggone good, because not only is he staying in touch with them, but he's also appealing it in case they made an error.
Right.
And I thought, I'd never have talked to Trevor about this, but I was actually pretty impressed by that fact that he was actually providing a safety net. Now, if this person had not done it on their own, if this person had done it on their own, they wouldn't have known it had been appealed. They wouldn't have known it had been denied. They would not have appealed it, and they probably would have lost several months of benefits. Is that right?
Yeah, you're absolutely. They would have had to start from the beginning. I mean, there's also the tricks of the trade that I know about reopening cases that, that maybe, are old. There's a whole bunch of things that we can do. And when you hire an attorney, when you hire Smith & Wax, you're going to get all that sort of inside knowledge that we've gained over, heck, I think Al's been doing this for 40 years, so I mean, literally. And or maybe 30, heck, I don't know.
At least 30.
Yeah, at least 30. But you're going to get all those little inside tidbits that, that you're not going to know. I mean, if the claimant does it themselves, they're really going to go up against a great big federal agency.
It's like pushing against a glacier, it seems like to me. The glacier just keeps moving.
And that's how they move. Yeah. They move slow.
That's the main reason I don't do Social Security. I actually have handled a couple of Social Security disability claims. Those were back in the 90s. And but the most aggravating thing I found out was trying to contact the Social Security Administration. And I'd get a number to call, and I'd talk to somebody, and 2 weeks later they would change the number, it seemed like. And I couldn't reach them, and it just got to be so frustrating. And that's really why I sent him to you, because back then I was dealing with Al a whole lot, and Al knew what he was doing. I know he handled a lot of appeals, and it's got a really good reputation. You do too in this stuff, and I consider myself an expert in the workers' comp field. I consider you an expert in the Social Security field, and I just feel a lot more comfortable with my clients going to you handling those, because you do so much of this, and this is just about all you do, isn't it?
Scott, yes, this is the only thing we do is Social Security disability. And, I can't thank you enough for trusting us with your clients over the last several years.
Well, my clients have been happy, and that's why we keep sending them to you. And if they weren't happy, we wouldn't. And I don't know what else I can say. I mean, I think Trevor's had a real good result in all those cases. I think it's great for my clients, too, because I feel like I'm helping them by getting them to Trevor, because a lot of these folks don't even realize they've got a potential claim here. They've been paying money into the system. Money's been taken out of their paycheck for 30, 40 years. Their family's hurting. We get in the nasty arguments in workers' comp sometimes. They try to cut benefits off. They try to deny medical treatment. If you've got this Social Security claim going, you've got money coming in. If you've been off work long enough, you've got a safety net with Medicaid to pay for some of the medical expenses that we're arguing about. Their life is a lot easier once they get Social Security disability. Not everybody can get it, but I think it's something that, again, is the prudent thing to do, is to go ahead and apply for it if it looks like you're going to be off for a substantial period of time. The worst that can happen is you go back to work, and that makes everybody happy. But if you don't, if you have a long period of recovery, if unfortunately you don't go back to work, then you've got this safety net going for you.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Friends, I hope you found this as informative as I have. I mean, this legal stuff is complicated. Now you get the Kentucky State workers' compensation system involved, and now you get the federal Social Security Administration involved. It's just stuff I don't want to personally have to handle, and that's why you've got resources here in our community right here in Louisville. But you guys handle cases across the state, so it's not like, well, I just have to live in Jefferson County. No, you guys,
actually, Trevor,
on the federal level,
people that were in Missouri before.
Yeah.
And I'm not.
Yes, you did. That's right. We got a St. Louis client from you, didn't we? Yeah. Yes. I mean, I'm federal. I mean, I'm just only limited about,
my cases have to have some kind of connection to Kentucky, but you can handle a case in Florida. I mean,
I could, but it would be cost prohibitive. I mean,
theoretically, you could, though.
I could, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. But friends, these podcasts, if you've enjoyed this, I'm going to encourage you to subscribe to Scott Scheynost. I mean, yours is Heard at Work, the Heard at Work podcast. You can go out to Apple iTunes. You can go out to Google Podcast now and find that. Just type in Scott Scheynost, type in Heard at Work podcast. All of this stuff is available for you. And Trevor, again, you can go out and type in Trevor Smith in iTunes or Trevor Smith in Google Podcasts, you can look for the Social Security Disability Podcast, and that's going to be Trevor. So this information's here. Both of you guys have websites. These podcasts will always show up on those websites as well. And there's a wealth of information. Not to mention, both of these guys have pretty active Facebook pages. So if you like Facebook, you're going to find these episodes posted there as well, on LinkedIn, other places. So the information's out there. We're trying to make it very easy for you. And again, if you have a question, go ahead and pick up the phone and engage with both of these guys. And we'll just take it from there. But I want to thank you both for your time. I know it's been an informative half hour, 40 minutes here. But you guys are great at what you do, and I'm glad our community has you guys sitting there ready to help.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you,
They should have heard us talking before we started this today. Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of Hurt at Work. Scott will be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. For more information, be sure to visit ScheynostLaw.com. That's SCHEYNOST law.com. You can also follow Scott's Workers' Comp office on Facebook. Until next time, be safe and remember, Scott's ready to help, especially when you and your family need it the most.